Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our community. What did they do to get started and what are they doing to stay there? And we are in season 3, and I have another special guest. His name is Rick Robinson. He's the managing director at Ramsee Consulting Group. I've known Rick for a long time. So excited to have you on the show. How you doing, Rick?
I'm doing well, Bruce. Thanks for having me on.
Oh man, I'm glad to have you on. I've had you on my list to get you on the show. You know, I always like to start off the show kind of reflecting on when I either met my guest or when they came into my path. And for you, I've known you many years. We met at Dallas HR. I can't remember exactly what year it was. I wanted to say 2010, 11-ish.
2010.
Was it 2010? Do you remember that?
2010. Yeah, we were doing a strategic planning session with all the boards. And back then there were numerous boards at Dallas HR. I think there still are. I think there were about 40, 45 people in the room, and we ran a 2-day strategic planning session for you guys.
I remember my head was just blown. You were working the whiteboard like no other. And I was like, man, there's something special going on here. And so I'm so glad that I was part of that. And then we've been connected ever since. We're going to talk about leadership today. We're going to talk about some of the things you're doing, even with Texas SHRM, and a lot of other things. And so let's go ahead and get started. I want to ask you to kind of kick us off. Would you share a brief highlight of who, you know, for those who don't know, who's Ramsee Consulting Group and how do you serve your customers?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, what we do is we help organizations and people envision what's possible and articulate that and figure out how to get there. And it's probably summarized best by the C in Ramsee, SEE, stands for strategy, engagement, and execution. So, you know, figuring out where you want to go and figuring out how you got to get there, and, you know, what kind of leadership do you need, and leadership programs that are going to enable you to engage your employees and get where you want to go. So that's what we're all about.
I love that. I love how, so that was a strategy there, right? The C, SEE. What does that stand for again?
Strategy, execution, and engagement.
Okay. I love that.
And one of my favorite expressions is when you're talking to somebody and they say, I can't see it, right? When you're saying, here's where we want to take the organization, and they say, I just don't see it. And it's true. They can't see it. They literally cannot see that as a possibility. So really kind of part of our mission is to help people see it, to see what's possible.
Oh man, I've had some other guests on the show, and when I just hear the word mission, I just get chills because because that tells me there's purpose in what you do, and that purpose gives you that fulfillment, right?
Absolutely.
Oh man.
Absolutely.
Oh man, I love that. Oh, I'm excited to get into this. And I know there's a lot of listeners that are probably right now, if they were driving, they probably pulled over, getting out their pens or notepad and taking some notes here, because I think there's going to be a lot of good information there. It's going to help a lot of people. Hey, I would love for you, you know, I've known you for a long time, but I would love for you to hear or you to share the Rick Robinson story. Like, where did you grow up, and how in the world did you get into this executive coaching and leadership?
So I'll give you the very abbreviated version, but I was born in far north Dallas. And so for your Dallasites, the next question is, where did you go to high school? So I went to W.T. White High School, started at Jesuit, finished at W.T. White. Thought I was going to like going to a private school, but there were no girls there. So, and I didn't realize I'd missed that so much. So I transferred, started at Baylor and then transferred and finished at A&M with degrees in accounting and finance. So I'm a recovering accountant. Worked as an accountant for about 6-7 years. Well, I missed an important step. I went to the Peace Corps right after college because the thought of putting on a tie and showing up the same place 5 days a week just seemed like death to me. So went to the Fiji Islands and taught high school economics and accounting. And along the way, met a really good friend named Sean Merritt. And after I got out, Sean stayed a little longer than I did. And when he got back, he went to work in training and development. and immediately started trying to talk me into come working with him. He says, I'm doing this training thing and I think you'd be good at it. And I thought, well, I was always kind of in the middle of a project when we talked about it. So never really worked out until about 5 years later. I was between projects and wasn't real happy where I was at. So I called Sean and a couple other people and said, hey, I'm thinking of making a move. And he immediately sent me a plane ticket and flew me to Detroit and hired me to do training and development, which I knew nothing about. So I took a pretty hefty pay cut and started in the training business. So that first engagement that we had was working for GM, and Sean kind of taught me the ropes on the fundamentals and very basic fundamentals of instructional design. And we developed training games for the 10,000 employees in the Oshawa plant for up in Canada for GM, and started running those training sessions. And I'm realized this is what I'm meant to do. This
Wow.
is, seeing a light bulb go on for people and helping them living more fulfilled lives and helping them get what they want out of life. That's what I'm meant to do. So,
Oh man, I
that's
call
kind
that
of the
finding
drive.
your lane.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I read the book.
I love that. You found your lane. I want to go back just a little bit though, because there's some people and myself, I've done the same thing. And I know there's probably some people listening. You said that you decided to go make a move on something you didn't know how to do, and you took a pay cut. Like, what was that like? I mean, that had to be kind of little scary.
Um, it was and it wasn't. It
Uh-huh.
was because I was young and I was
Yeah.
single.
Okay.
I think it's scary if you're if you're married and you have a family to support, but it was just me. So it, I could have failed miserably and I would have learned a lot, and that would have been fine, and I would have moved on and done something else. There was a reason I had 16 different majors while I was in college, and that was because a lot of stuff interests me, but very few things held my interest.
Mm,
So I would try something, and what I learned early on is that a lot of times you don't know what you should be doing until you figure out what you shouldn't be doing.
mm.
So by trying it, I would say, that's not it. Being an accountant, I always knew that being an accountant wasn't the end all for me. That wasn't the end of the road. Um, the only reason I have degrees in accounting and finance is my dad took me to lunch after 3 years in college and said, look, I'm only paying for 4 years. You've had 16 majors. You've got a lot of credits. You got to pick something. You got a year. He goes, I'll pay for a year and a half. And so I literally had to get the course catalog out and figure out what I would graduate within a year and a half, because I had everything from photojournalism to business classes to physics to engineering, you name it. And so it turned out I could get a degree in accounting in 1 year. So I became an accounting major.
That's fantastic. I love that story. I was an accounting major until I got to accounting two. And then I quickly said, no, I am not that smart. I got to move on. And I changed a couple of times, and I finally settled on a business degree. And, and I didn't even know what that meant. Like when I got out, I was like, what do you mean the moving industry? That's a business. Hey, well, I want to talk leadership here. I want to talk leadership 2022. I always like to ask my guests this question, and I'm really curious about what you have to say to this. Whenever someone says, "Hey, Rick, what is leadership?" How do you respond to that?
That is an excellent question, and there's lots of really good answers. But recently, I apologize to whoever said it originally, because I can't remember the source. But for me, the thing that the quote that really kind of sums it up best is that leadership is getting people to want to do what you need them to be able to do, or need them to do, getting them. So it's not just getting them to do what you want them to do or do what you need them to do. It's getting them to want to do what you need them to do.
Want is the key word.
Yes.
And that's through, I've heard Maxwell talk about influence, right? Influencing that, creating that influence, but they've got to want to do that. Oh man, I love that. And I'm sitting here as you say that, I'm sitting here thinking about like my son, like getting him to
Right.
want to take out the trash or
Exactly. Now you can get him to take out the trash, but can
yeah.
you get him to want to take out the trash? And the reason that's so important is you look at, oh, the great resignation and the people moving jobs right now and how hard it is to find and keep good people. And you, so, and then so getting them to want to do that kind of starts to encompass all these things like mission and vision and core values and building the culture that gets them to want to be in that space, to get them to want to stay with your organization. Because people, I think through the pandemic have realized they don't have to.
Mm.
They have options. And I think, going to the office every day isn't what a lot of people want to do. So, they're going to be looking for other options, and they're, it's kind of like Bartleby the Scrivener. I'd prefer not to. So, I think we're going to see even more of that, especially with the millennials coming into the workforce in more numbers.
Well, speaking about the last couple of years, that pandemic, and it looks like we're kind of moving through that. I'm curious. I always like to ask the question around, any silver linings around that, but I want to ask you this question: how has it changed you over the last 2 years? Just the way you do things, do your training, because I'm thinking that there was probably a lot of training you did on site that you took online. What's been different for you?
Yeah. So, and part of it is a silver lining. All right. So I've been working from my house since 2001. So I have been doing this for a long time. And pre-pandemic, there wasn't a whole lot of grace when somebody knocked on your door and your dog went nuts, or your kid came in and sat on your lap in the middle of a call and wanted to talk to your boss. Right? People didn't have a lot of patience for that. And I
Yeah.
think one of the nice things is we've given each other a lot of grace on that. And now we welcome those interruptions, and it's like they want to know what kind of dog you have, and they want to say hi to your grandkid who wants to sit on your lap. So I think that's something that's different. I think that being able to do some of the meetings through Zoom, I still value face to face because I'm an old guy. So I love being able to shake somebody's hand and look them in the eye. But I can do 4, 5, 6 meetings via Zoom, and if I did all those meetings in person, that's 3 days, 2 or 3 days worth of meetings, as you well know, especially in the DFW area and having to travel between and the traffic and the construction and all of that. So that's something that's different and then beneficial. And then one of the things we've done differently is we did a pivot early on, and I partnered with none other than Sean Merritt, who was my friend from the Peace Corps, who I credit with getting me into training and development and consulting and all of that good stuff. He gave me my first shot. And early on in the pandemic, he pivoted his champion to leader training. We could talk a little bit more about what that means, but it's a leadership development program that's been existed in one form or another for the last 20 years. But now it's totally online, and it's enabled us to reach a much broader audience and bring more people into the program.
Hey, let me ask you this question, Rick, and I want to ask for some of the people that are listening that they think they might need to bring in someone like a Ramsee Consulting Group to come in and help them. They're not sure. There's so much training online today. What are some things that are some signs that people would see that would flag them that, hey, you need to reach out and you need to talk to someone about coming in and helping with some type of coaching? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that you can see, and you'll notice if you're paying attention, is this lack of ability to transition from champion to leader. So
Okay.
I'm gonna go into 2 areas. Really, one is, what is the difference between education, training, and development? Because those are 3 really separate things.
Okay.
And you want to make sure you match up with your needs. You match that up with your needs. The second thing is kind of like the indicator that you need it. And that is related to the inability to transition out of champion mode. So this is based on the work of James Citron and his book, The Dynamic Path. And what Citron says is, we all start as individual contributors, so we're new at it. And then we work really hard to get good at it, and we become champions.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, you get so good at it that they promote you to leadership. So in my case, I was so good at doing spreadsheets. They said, we want you to quit doing spreadsheets and we want you to lead these 15 people. You're now the manager. And they slap you on the back and they tell you, go get them. And in my case, they gave me a copy of the 1 Minute Manager and told me to holler if I needed any help. So you don't even know what help you need. So you're kind of going to struggle. You're going to fake it till you make it. But what largely we're going to be stuck in this champion mode because that's where my comfort zone is. And I'm comfortable doing the spreadsheet. So I'm going to hold on to those. And I'm going to hold on to this work and I'm going to hold on to that work. And I'm hoping people leave me alone so I can focus on doing my spreadsheets. And this will last until you get that mindset shift that developing your people is the most important thing you're going to do all day. They're not a distraction. If you've got people in leadership, even supervisory positions that are totally focused on the task orientation of getting, the next widget done or the next job done, the next spreadsheet done, and they're neglecting their people, then you need to bring someone in to help develop the leadership ability in them and help them with that mindset shift. And it's got to start with the mindset. Early on in the program, I said, we've been doing this for over 20 years. Early on in the program, the focus was really on tools, right? So here's some models and tools and can help you be a better leader. And they will, if you get the mindset shift. But a lot of people struggled with shifting their mindset into that leader mode rather than being in champion mode. Because if you stay in champion mode, you're actually competing with your people. And just as kind of an example, and it's related to, you got to look at how people are compensated and all this other stuff too. I have a friend, I was talking to her, the company brought her in to be the VP of sales.
Okay.
She has 12 people that report to her, and her task is to develop the sales ability in those 12 people, right? So pretty basic. Rolls around to the end of the year and they start talking about how they're going to pay her bonus, and they want to pay her bonus based on the work she personally brought in the door. Right. So if you think about it, that would put her in direct competition with the people she's supposed to be developing.
Right.
And so they're keeping her in champion mode. So we were able to dialogue a little bit about that so that she could kind of share with them, look, really, you want to compensate me on how well my 12 people do, not on how well I do.
I love
and
that.
Part of this aha comes from a story that actually Sean told me about sitting on the rental bus next to a guy that worked for, and they started talking. He says, who do you work for? He goes, I'm the regional sales director for Geico. And he goes, okay, so what's the big thing that makes you guys different? He goes, I don't think you heard me. I'm the regional sales director. I don't really know much about insurance. I'm not focused on selling it to the customers. I'm focused on the 15 people that report to me and making sure them and their families get what they need out of life. So that was that's that transition from champion to leader. I'm not about that. I'm about making sure these people are successful, putting them in a position to succeed. And part of what we do is we want to make sure that we're developing that skill. So the difference between education and training and development is pretty important, because as you said, you can find stuff that they call training all over the internet,
right?
Videos. It's a training video. It's really more education. And you want to make sure that when you hire a vendor or you get involved in a program, that you're actually training your people. And really kind of the upshot is that training is teaching people how to do something they don't already know how to do. If they already know how to do it, it's not training. You don't have a training problem. You've got kind of either motivation or a marketing problem. And everybody intuitively knows the difference between education and training. And I apologize if this offends anybody, but I'm going to tell you a story.
Okay. I love stories.
This will tell you that you know the difference.
Okay.
Right. So, all right. So I have a 13-year-old daughter.
Okay.
This year, she came home with a permission slip for me to sign to have a sex education class.
Okay.
I gladly signed it. I'm all for it. I think it's an important thing. However, if she ever comes home with a permission slip for a sex training class, somebody's going to get hurt really bad at that school.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So you intuitively see how you react to that, to
Yeah.
sex education, sex training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Education.
So
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
yeah. And then the third piece of that is development. So how do you take those new things you're teaching people and get them to be able to use them? So there's got to be some application elements in that, which may sound familiar to you based on the LEADHRS program that we put together for Texas SHRM.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that, because you've been very instrumental in helping us put this program together. We have a great team. So just to kind of set it up, Texas SHRM has 32 chapters in the great state of Texas that we have a mission to support and connect chapter HR leaders to help elevate that HR profession. And we do that through advocacy. We do that through education, and we do that through leadership development. There's the education and development right there. But one of the things that we were wanting to do better was the development. And so Director Jimmy Taylor and our state director-elect Roseanne Garza came to me and said, hey, let's put together a program. And of course, I quickly pulled in people that I thought could help put that program together. And of course, I'd worked with you before, Rick. And so we put this program together. And I want to talk about that because we're calling this program LEADHRS, LEADHRS. And that LEAD stands for leadership, education, advocacy, development. So that all aligns with our mission. We are HR and we are serving people every day. And then so we put this together, and we put it together for all the chapter leaders, and we have 6 modules, and we're halfway through. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on the podcast, because I want to talk about just kind of where we're at now, and just some of the things that have kind of stood out to you. I'm going to really quick just share some of the modules we've already had. Number 1, we started with what is leadership, and we talked about what you're talking about, champion the leader. But then we talked about setting direction and strategic planning. And then this month, we're talking about situational leadership and motivation. And each one of those topics, we're doing content, then we're coaching these assignments you're talking about.
Right.
And that's really where I'm really gaining a lot here. And so talk a little bit about what you've seen so far and kind of what stood out to you about the program so far.
Excellent. Yeah. And what I've seen is what I pretty much expected to see, because the LEADHRS program is patterned after the Champion the Leader program from Huron Associates. So Sean has kindly allowed us to use a lot of the content, but more importantly, the structure. So the structure it consists of a webinar, which is more educational in nature, followed by an application assignment where you're expected to actually try it. So we give you the tools to try it and do something different, get out of your comfort zone and learn something from trying the tools. And then we also give you one-on-one coaching to help you use the tools and talk about how you use them and where you might have gone wrong and how to use them better in the future. So that's where the development piece of it comes into it. And then we have a group call to build this collaboration in the community. And people learn from each other and talk about what they did on the tools and what they would do differently next time. So you get ideas from other people and from their coaches. So it's kind of a rich program that runs on a monthly cycle. So the next month, then you go back into the next set of topics. So yeah, it's where I see the people that succeed the most in it. They schedule the time and they honor their schedule and they value their own time. And a big part of what we talked about early on is how do you use your time? Because it's your most valuable asset. And everybody gets 24 hours in a day. So the most important decision you can make is how you're going to spend that. And if you don't decide how you're going to spend it, people are more than happy to spend it for you. So
yeah,
take control of your calendar.
What was that assignment? Time index?
The use of time index.
Use of time index. And that was a very fascinating exercise. and it really makes you think about where you're spending your time, and are you
Right.
spending that where the value is,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. And what you realize is that you're probably doing some stuff that you should get somebody else to do. You should outsource it, because you're really wasting your time, because you're not the only one qualified to do that. And usually that's because, it may be something we like doing, and it may be something we're comfortable doing, and that's okay. Let's be honest about it with ourselves. That maybe I shouldn't be doing it, but I'm going to do it because I like it.
I would love to kind of get on the topic of what we talked about. We talked about setting direction,
Hmm.
and you shared a story about how someone had asked you about what they should do, and you said, "Well, it depends."
Oh,
And you went through the process of, what's your strategy? Talk about the importance of knowing your strategy before you even start.
yeah. So that's why when we do these programs, one of the very first things we're going to talk about is, creating a vision for where you want to go. Any sort of vision. It doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be fancy. It's just some idea, some list of bullet points you want to achieve. How do you want your world to look different 6 months, a year from now? Just pick a time in the horizon that you want something to change. Um, and the story, one of the reasons why that's so important is that, we talk a lot about, the different elements of the levers you pull, like, the structure and infrastructure of your organization, and the culture of your organization, and the measurement systems and dashboards that you use, and your organizational capability. And you can't have a relevant conversation about any of that until you know where you're going.
Mm.
And the story that I told you is, it actually involves my sister, right? So she called me up and she said, she worked for a corporate relocation company, strangely enough, a competitor.
Yeah, now you're talking my language.
Yeah, and I did too back in 1985. I
Yeah.
worked, right after I got out of the Peace Corps. I worked for, God, what was the name of that company? Um, what was the biggest one in 1985, Bruce?
So the biggest in 1985, I was bowling, man. I was trying to make the pro bowlers too. Are you kidding me?
So it'll come to me anyway.
Yeah, of
So,
course.
ExxonMobil was her account. So,
Right.
they just move people all over the
Yeah.
world. And she
Right.
called me one day and says, "Hey, I'm thinking of moving from 3 managers to 2 managers in my department." I said, "Okay." She said, "Well, you know a little something about this kind of thing." And I said, "Well, a little bit." I said, "I'll tell you what, buy me lunch. I'll tell you what I think."
I
So
like that.
I picked her.
Negotiating that lunch.
Yeah, well, I made sure to pick a nice restaurant too. So I was going to get my money's worth. And so we show up and we order, and she puts two org charts in front of me. One had 3 managers on it, and one had two. And she says, "Well, what do you think? Do you think it'll work?" And I said, that's the standard consultant answer I gave her, was it depends.
Yeah.
Because you ask a consultant a question, it doesn't matter what it is. The answer is always, it depends. Now, if they're a good consultant, they know what it depends on, right? And so she goes, "What do you mean it depends?" I said, "Well, what's your business case? What's your strategy? What are you trying to achieve with this change? Why, what's the driver behind it?" And she said, "Well, we really haven't talked about that." I said, "Well, then go for it. Because if you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter what your car looks like." So, yeah, you can have any org structure. I can't tell you if it's going to work or not until I know what you're trying to achieve with that. Right. So you can't talk about something as simple as your org structure until you know what your strategy is, till you know what you want to achieve. Are you measuring the right things? It depends. It depends on what your strategy is. Walmart measures different things than Nordstrom. And by the same token, Walmart and Nordstrom have different cultures.
Yeah.
And you ask which one's better. Well, they're right for what they're trying to achieve. It's
Right.
Culture follows strategy. Structure follows strategy. It all has to be driven with strategy. So you got to set your direction first before you can have otherwise you're just throwing stuff at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah. That's
There's a lot
fantastic.
of good ideas out there, but not every good idea is a good idea for you or your organization. And you can't tell if it's good for you or not, until you know where you want to go, which is why I do a lot of work with city councils, trying to define their vision, get a common vision so they can all pull in the same direction, and that staff can now evaluate all these different things, whether they want to go with smart city or, all of these different things that they could do they don't know if they're a good idea until they have direction from council on what they want their city to become in the future.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I love that. That really, it just continues to, you're building on each of these modules. And the last one I want to talk about today, I want to talk about situational leadership and motivation. And we talked a little bit about the environment and the individual. Talk a little bit about what we were talking about in our, and by the way, this is the content, and then all of a sudden you've got application.
Right.
And so now all of a sudden we're doing this or assignment, right? To how can we apply that? But you talked a little bit about, before you focused on individual, trying to help them get to, put things in their hands to be, motivated and successful, where you talked about then there was a shift to the environment. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So what you're really describing is a tool or a framework that we call Gilbert's Grid. It's from Thomas Gilbert created it, I think in 1978.
Okay.
And legend says it was on the back of a bar napkin in a bar in Kalamazoo, Michigan. He drew up what he called his model for organizational effectiveness. And basically what Gilbert says is that there's certain things the environment needs to provide people, and there's certain things people bring with them that the individual provides. And he had three categories. One was information, the second was resources, and the third was incentives. So, kind of the big aha for that is that as leaders, as young leaders without development, before we realize that we're in charge of the system, is that when someone fails, we look at the person and we address the individual, and we try to motivate them, and we try to train them, and we try to, question whether or not they're capable. What Gilbert's model found is that the number one reason people fail is because you didn't set clear expectations. You didn't give them the information they needed. You didn't tell them what good looks like, or you didn't give them feedback on how they were doing, or from a resource perspective, you didn't give them the tools they needed or the people they needed, or you didn't give them an incentive that matched up with the expectations. So most failure is environmentally related. It's not to say people will fail, but take a systems view, and a system view says if they fail, the system allowed it. So why did you create a system that allowed somebody to make that mistake? So take that view and redesign your process and redesign your system so that mistake can't happen. And now the people are happier, they're more fulfilled. You're not setting them up to fail, and you're not putting people in there and going, why can't anybody get this right? Well, if you've got a problem, if you got a job that nobody can get right, the problem is probably with the job, right? And not the people you're putting in there.
I tell you, I love what you touched on, because I've been thinking about this in all areas of everything I do. And the question is, what does good look like? And I love how you said that, because you're like, hey, that's creating that environment. Are you sharing what does good look like whenever you're coordinating a move, like in my business, right? You're coordinating, what does that look like? Or
well, setting that expectation, right, Bruce?
Right. Yeah. Or what about a meeting? What does a good meeting look like?
And the second part of that too is another story that actually I heard from Sean, and it's about being able to see the work, right? To accomplish good, right? So story goes like this. He had a friend of his that he had met when the guy his name's Bruce, by the way. Oh. And he met him when Bruce was 70 years old. And Bruce tells this story. He grew up on a farm in rural Michigan. And when he was 10 years old, he came down on a Saturday and went to his dad and said, hey, Daddy, what are we going to do today? We're going to mend the fences. We're going to milk the cows. We're going to plant. What are we going to do? And his dad just kind of looked at him and he says, okay, you've lived on this farm for 10 years. You're old enough to know we work in seasons, and you know what time of year it is. So I want you to go upstairs and I want you to think about, I'm going to let you plan our work for the day. I want you to think about what we need to do. So Bruce was like, man, somebody woke up on the wrong side of the bed. So he went upstairs and he said, okay, let me think about it. And he said, well, it's not planting season. So he came back down a little bit later. He says, Dad, here's what I think. It's not planting season. So, we got fences to mend. We always got to milk the cows. So we got to do that. And the tractor probably needs an oil change. So he mapped out 3 or 4 things that they could do during the day. And his dad looked at him. He says, "I'm very proud of you. And I'm very proud of your ability to see the work."
Mm.
Right? You got to be able to live in your environment and see what work needs to be done. And if you can't see the work, your whole life, you're going to depend on people to tell you what to do.
Mm.
Right.
Wow.
So most of us, the most successful people, have found the ability to see the work and to do the work. And that, I got chills when I heard the story, because one of the things that really motivates me is to be a good husband. Right. And so I took that and used that at home and remind myself daily to try and see the work. Right. So there's always work around the house that needs to be doing. And, all too often, I was just blind to it. There's, the dog hair on the floor that needs vacuuming, or the dishwasher that needs to be emptied. So consciously go out of your way to see the work. Because if you don't, you're just waiting for people to tell you what to do.
I got to tell you, I have, you said you had chills. I have chills right now. I've never heard that story. That is fantastic. I love that. See the work. Man, this is so good, man. I tell you, I could talk about like all of this all day long. We're going to be, I'm very excited. We're going to be talking about culture, building effective teams, and then project planning to finish this out. So I'm excited to get through the process and kind of get feedback and see how we can continue to grow this leaders program. And I appreciate you being part of that. Hey, I want to ask you, I'm just curious. I mean, you mentioned, helps you being a better husband, better dad. What drives you?
Well, in a large part, that's it, right?
Yeah.
That's my why is, but really what drives me, and we've touched on it before, is helping other people lead more fulfilled lives and to get what they want out of life. That's what means something. And that's, where you get excited. And when you can put somebody and help create an environment, any environment, wherever they're working, whether it's volunteer work or whatever, where they understand what you're trying to achieve, they understand the mission, they understand the vision, and they know how they contribute to that. Right? If you think about the job you loved, it wasn't the money. Money will never make you love a job. It can make you hate it, but it won't make you love it. And it can make you stay at a job you hate. But what'll make you love a job is that you believe in the work that you're doing. You're doing good things for people. You're helping them live better lives. You're working with people you enjoy working with. You have a boss that understands and gets you and helps you understand the work. You know what good looks like, and you know how you contribute to achieving what the organization's trying to do. Right? You know how you fit in, and you have direct line of sight to how you contribute. That putting people in that kind of environment, that's where people get excited about going to work. That's a job worth doing. So, and there's a lot of jobs that ain't worth doing.
I love that. It's so inspiring. Hey, let me ask you this, and I'll bet you I know what kind of answer I'm going to get here, but I just want to ask you real quick as we pivot off this subject, for someone that says, I love what I hear, but they're thinking, well, how long does it take? Like typically when you go in and you help, you help us, you talked about the city earlier, or you help different companies. How long do you typically go in and work with a company?
Oh man.
Is it the two words? It depends.
It is. You're going to get the standard consultant answer. It depends on a lot of factors.
Yeah.
Right. Because some people are more, have progressed further than others.
Yeah.
Some people need more help and we need to start earlier in the process. Some people keep us around forever because, they champion the leader programs, kind of an off the shelf program. Does a lot of really good stuff. It helps you get the mindset. So if you got a bunch of leaders, that's a 4-month program.
Okay.
Well, actually 5. It's got a bonus session at the end that teach you how to do a short-term improvement project. So how to implement a lot of the ideas that you're going to come up with through the program. So that's one avenue. You could do a custom program like we did for leaders. They had some unique needs based on volunteer leadership. So that's a 6-month program. I've done year-long programs. I've done month-to-month programs. So it kind of depends. And then, whether or not it's appropriate to bring coaching into that, the one-on-one coaching element, and then we do training in a bunch of other areas that are leadership related and not necessarily just leadership development. And then we do, like I mentioned, with cities, we do just the strategic planning consultant. We help them come up with their strategic plan and the vision of council, and help council work better with staff, et cetera. Those kinds of things.
And of course, that's what you did when you were working with Dallas HR, come up with the vision and the strategy. So, man, there's so much here. There's so much here. I love all of this. I learn from you every time I talk to you, Rick. Hey, I want to ask you, as a leader, I'm always curious, like, do you have you personally, do you have like a practice that you have in your everyday that helps you stay on track? Like, are you an early riser? Do you work late? What do you have? But because what I see is typically guests on Life in the Leadership Lane, they have different ways of doing things, but they all seem to have a system. Do you have that?
I don't. Every day is different. Every day is unique. And that's one of the things I like about it. Now, that being said, we have a divisions of labor within the household, and part of my contribution is getting my daughter to school and picking her up. So it kind of revolves around that. And that's one of the beauties of having my own business and setting my own hours and being able to set those boundaries so I can make that happen most of the time. Now, if I've got a client that needs me somewhere at 7 a.m, then we work that out. And, we do that as a family.
Yeah.
But one of the things that really kind of keeps me grounded, though, and keeps me set is I don't know if I've ever told you the story of the 5 balls. Have I ever told you that one?
You have, but I would love for you to share this with the audience, because I love it.
If I have one thing that I would tell people, and this kind of like made all the difference in the world to me, is there's a book, the title was Diane's Diary for Nicholas or something like that. Anyway, it was a silly little almost romance novel, but within that book was this story of the 5 balls. And I don't think it was original to that author. I've seen it on the internet a few different ways, but the upshot of it is we're all juggling numerous balls. And the author said there's 5 of them, right? So one of the balls is your work.
Okay.
And we're juggling that with family, with friends and community is the 3rd ball. The 4th ball is our spirituality or faith, or whatever you believe in, and the 5th ball is our health. So we've got work, health, family, community, and faith.
Okay.
And so we're juggling all these balls. So what we lose sight of is the fact that all the balls are made of glass except for one, and the ball that's not made of glass is made of rubber. And if we drop any of the other balls, they could shatter irreparably. We can't put them back together. They're just lost. We drop the rubber ball, it's going to bounce. And the rubber balls work. And what we tend to do is we sacrifice family and faith and community and the glass balls for the rubber ball. And if we drop that one, it'll bounce. So just kind of keep that in perspective. What we do is not life and death. Keep your priorities straight, keep your boundaries in place. One of the things I learned early on is that if I answer the phone at 8 o'clock, the client's going to expect me to answer the phone at 8 o'clock. And that's family time. And, if that's a problem, then they're probably not a good fit for us as a client. So we can move on down the road. And that doesn't mean I'm not responsive. It just means, it's family time.
Well, and I like how we talked earlier about, setting expectations, right? Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what that is. You basically set the expectation saying, hey, I have family time between 8 and 9 a.m. or whatever time that is. And then after that, and I love that because that's the environment.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And people will adapt to your boundaries and your expectations. And it goes back to the use of time too, because that doesn't just work for your work environment, or it works for your home environment. What's important to you, and you need to make the time for that. So
Man, it's been so much fun going through this leaders program with you. I've learned so much, and I continue. What's interesting about any development program is a lot of things that we've seen before, but it's not the right season. And then we see it
mhm.
again in a different season, and it looks and feels different.
Oh,
Would you agree with
absolutely.
that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you got to be in the right place, right? For a lot of this, people will ask, when is the right time to go through it? Shouldn't you put them through it before they become leaders? And you can get them high potentials ready for leadership, but it's a different season, and it's gonna mean something different than it will after they've tried and failed to be a leader, right? Because then they're like, man, I wish I'd have known that 6 months ago. Well, 6 months ago, you wouldn't have listened. So
Right.
you know what I mean? Yeah, the 20-year-old me wouldn't have listened
I
to
was going to
a
say
lot of the
that.
wisdom that
I
I
was going to
have.
say that Bruce at 20, he wouldn't have listened. I don't know if Bruce at 30 would have even listened, but I do today, and I've gotten so much out of it. Hey, last question before I shift over to it's time to accelerate. I always just like to give you, and you've given some incredible advice today. I love the balls. I want to go find my juggle balls right now and start juggling. I can juggle three, but I can't juggle five. Any advice that you find yourself sharing with others? Maybe you learned it early up growing up, or you've learned it from, I mean, you've shared incredible advice from Sean.
Mhm.
Any advice you find yourself just sharing on a regular basis?
Oh gosh, so much, Bruce. I mean, it's just I think I've touched on quite a few, and I don't want to be redundant. But one of the things that I like to tell leaders is two things. One is when you're a new leader, it's very difficult sometimes for you to give people feedback because
Okay.
you don't want to hurt their feelings.
Yeah.
And then the advice I give people is just to think about who gave you the most feedback in your life, in your career. And I guarantee you it's one of three or four people. It's either a parent, a teacher, a coach, or a spouse. And then I tell them, those people hate you and want you to feel bad about yourself, right? And the answer is no. They love you and want you to be better. So if you're going to give feedback, you got to come from the place. You got to start with the heart. You got to come from a loving place that you want people to do better. You couple that with the fact that as a leader, you have an opportunity to be somebody really special in somebody's life. Um, every successful person I know had somebody who believed in them before they believed in themselves. And you have an opportunity to be that for somebody, whether you're a formal leader or not. We all have the ability to lead. And you get to be, if you choose to be, you get to be the person that believes in somebody and allows them to believe in themselves. And that can be really powerful.
Many times I'll talk to guests on the podcast, and they've given so much advice. Sometimes I think about skipping that question, but I go ahead and ask because I feel like there's something, one more piece of advice that just may move somebody listening. And that advice there that you shared just now, I have chills because I'm thinking about my mom.
Mhm.
And when I was, I don't know, I was 19, 20, 21 years old. I was out there bowling, trying to, get on tour and just be successful in the game of bowling. And I remember bowling a couple of times. We went out to Las Vegas, and she just said, "Man, you can do it. You can do." And I just remember I didn't believe. Like I knew I was pretty good, but whenever I would be bowling against a lot of other people with as much or greater talent, I would all of a sudden start doubting myself. And man, she just like spoke belief into me. It was just an incredible time. And she's continued to do that. But I thought as you told that story, she just like popped in my mind. I felt like she was
Mhm.
talking to me
Right.
right then. So I appreciate you sharing That was absolutely incredible. And so this has been a wonderful conversation. I want to skip over to it's time to accelerate. This is the last part of the show where I like to ask my guests just a few questions as we kind of wrap up the show. The first question I always like to ask is, would you rather read a book or listen to a podcast? Do you read much?
I'm a reader. Yeah.
Oh,
So I would rather read a book.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just, and I'm a big fan of fiction and nonfiction, but
Yeah. Okay.
for business books, actually, I would rather watch a TED Talk because I find that in a
Oh,
20-minute TED Talk, I can get 90% of the relevant content out of a business book.
okay. I'm glad you said that because on one of our calls, you mentioned there was you were talking about feedback,
Hmm.
about that story about starting with the heart. I just I love that. But you said, hey, if you want to read the book Radical Candor, you can go get the book, or there's a great TED Talk that you can watch in like 20 minutes. Was that right?
Yes, absolutely. And you see Kim Scott, who's the author, talk about the book and the origins of the radical candor model and tell you a couple of funny stories. So it's awesome.
Yeah, I'll put that link in the show notes for everybody to check that out. And so I'm glad you brought that up. Hey, let me you talked a lot about what you do, right? Education, leadership, development. Outside of all the stuff you do, outside of work, what energizes you?
Oh, um, of course, there's my family,
Yeah.
which is my big focus. But pretty much anytime any sort of competition, whether
Hmm.
I don't care whether it's cornhole or golf or we've made games out of everything through our lives, right? After a softball game, it's a competition to see who can get how many empty beer cans in the trash can from 10 feet, right? So that I always find energizing. But my family, my wife and my daughter, it's just the three of us, and we're all pretty competitive. And my daughter's in club volleyball and just loving it, and we going to tournaments on the weekends, and my wife's now playing the seniors, and she qualified for nationals, so I'm so proud of her. We're going to Florida next month and for the senior games, so
Wow, that is
all of that kind of stuff.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm energized from you just sharing that story. That is
Yep.
great. I love that. Hey, last question.
Hmm.
I like to ask, this is the last question I have for the show. One of my favorite questions. And here's the question. Rick, 10 years older, he's knocking at your door and you're going to go answer that door. What's he going to tell you?
Well, hopefully, he's gonna give me a quote from Babe.
From
That'll
Babe.
do, pig. You remember at the end of Babe, and the pig did good, and he said, "That'll do, pig. That'll do." So hopefully, that'll do. You done good, because I just turned 60, so 10 years from now, that's kind of my plan for kind of scaling back. I don't think I'll ever fully retire because I love what I do, and you know, uh, I think a lot of people fail at retirement because based on the premise to do nothing, and it seems boring to me. So I don't see a reason to stop as long as anybody's willing to pay me. But I think we'll scale back because my wife loves to travel, and I think we'll be doing that in 10 years.
Well, I got to tell you, this has been an inspiring conversation. I've appreciate you being on the show so much. Hey, if someone wants to connect with you, they heard something that you shared, or they just want to follow you, what's the best way for them to connect?
Um, well, the website is ram-c.com. And you can just email me at rick@ram-c.com, or you can call me on my cell at 214-448-5623.
I will put your contact information in the show notes. You definitely live life in the leadership lane, my friend. Hey, again, I appreciate you coming on, just sharing perspective, wisdom. I know there's listeners out there that are like it's making them think, and it's going to help them and continue to drive your mission. Right. You talked about that earlier
Absolutely.
when you're able to help people. And so for that, I say thank you. And of course, your friendship, man, it means so much.
Well, thank you, Bruce. I appreciate you having me on, and we'll keep doing good stuff.
Can't wait. Hey, I can't wait to share this. I'll talk to you later.
All right, brother.